Christian Whiton, he's a former State Department senior advisor. Good to see you, Christian.
Good to be here, Arthel.
All right. First, let me get your take on Netanyahu's comments.
I think it's a very important point why we're so focused on the nuclear program, Iran's nuclear program, which is not going to be resolved by this agreement. We've lost some sight of the other things Iran does more conventionally, whether militarily or in the realm of political warfare, that makes the region less safe for our allies and for our free people, free countries. So, for example, it has its tentacles deep into Lebanon, subverting the political process there. It's trying to dominate the Shiite portion of Iraq, and recently it's had great success. Its proxy army, the Houthis, have made deep inroads in Yemen. So all of these bad things that Iran does, in addition to killing Americans whenever it can, are going to get worse as this regime gets more and more money. And in many ways, the regime has been legitimized by this negotiation process the U.S. has undertaken.
And Christian, it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is the most vocal critic on the world stage. I mean, is he alone, or do other countries share his concerns?
Yeah, it's interesting. The Obama administration really has tried to make it Netanyahu versus everyone else, or for it to seem like that. In fact, that's not the case. Almost all of our other allies, essentially every Arab state in the region, U.S. allies like Saudi Arabia, like the UAE, are very concerned about this, and also concerned to the extent that they may, at least Saudi, may look at its own nuclear option. Saudi officials have said explicitly they will make sure they have as much capability as the Iranians have, which looks to me and they intend to pursue a program of their own.
What's your assessment of the framework that's on the table? I mean, do you think it's possible to negotiate deal points that you feel ultimately would be more beneficial to the U.S.?
I think if we went in from a position of strength, the president himself has mentioned arms control treaties that were signed by Presidents Reagan and Nixon. If you look at Reagan in 1987, he signed a deal. It eliminated an entire class of nuclear weapons. It was the INF deal. But he was negotiating from strength. He had pursued a 600-ship Navy. He had fielded the early stages of a strategic defense initiative, built up the military. And more importantly, he had been very blunt about what he ultimately wanted to happen to the Soviet Union, that it would be consigned to the ash heap of history. That's completely different than what Obama has done. He's negotiated from weakness. He's issued concessions preemptively. Frankly, it looks a lot more like the failed agreements we had with North Korea in the last decade, which led to a North Korean nuclear capability.
Picking up there, Christian, the critics of President Obama claim that the president is essentially incapable of negotiating a deal with Iran. I mean, do you agree with that? And if it's not President Obama, who in the American landscape of politicians and negotiators would be best suited to cut a deal with Iran?
I don't think it actually comes down to who would be a better wordsmith or tactician. You have to change the factors. Iran has been pushing on an open door really since the 1979 revolution. It never really paid a serious price for taking our diplomats hostage. It never paid a price for killing Americans in Lebanon in the 1980s, for killing Americans in great numbers in Iraq in the last decade. So it's seen this situation where it beats the West again and again, especially at the negotiating table. So I think we should get away from these false choices of diplomacy or war and look at making life difficult for the regime. Look at giving power to Iranians who wanted to overthrow that government peacefully, especially in 2009 and 2010.
Is there anyone in the political landscape right now you think who would be better suited if President Obama is not suited to be the front person?
I think if you look at we're obviously going into a presidential cycle, and you'll have people, I think, on both sides of the aisle talking about restoring the U.S. military and our capabilities. Ultimately, the words of our diplomats are backed up and essentially given power by the might of our military, and that's just the sort of world we are in. And so any candidate who can increase U.S. capabilities, whether it's on the battlefield or with our other instruments of power, we need a better intelligence community, one that doesn't mistake every single new threat that comes along. We need a better State Department that can actually do tough diplomacy rather than just sort of bargain away advantages to dictatorial regimes like Iran, like North Korea. So any candidate who can talk about that would have, my interest.
Okay, well, I have to leave it there. You are joining us, Mr. Whiton, from San Francisco in lovely California. Next time, bring it in the studio. Don't talk to me and taunt me with the beautiful weather in California. See you.
Thanks, Arthur.